And welcome to this edition of Hidden History Stories from the Secret City. I'm Keith McDaniel, along with my co host, Ray Smith. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning, Keith. How are you today?
I'm good. You look like you're having a little bit of trouble with your computer, so now you're on your phone. So the angle may not be what people are used to, but that's okay. At least you can hear us now.
We do what we have to do to get by, don't we?
Exactly right. Exactly right. Ray, why don't you introduce our guest today?
Oh, I'd be glad to. We've got Shirley Raines with us today. Shirley is a good friend. She's had an outstanding career that she's written about in An Uncommon Journey, a book that I've thoroughly enjoyed, and it actually is an excellent book on leadership. And then she's also had some other books on birds and other things that I think have been very good and used well at the UT Arboretum. Got some trails out there that has many of the pictures out of the book. So I'm sure she'll talk to us a little about that. Shirley, we're glad to have you with us today. Why don't you start by just going back to your time as a teacher and then tell us how you came to be president of a university?
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much. I started my career as a preschool teacher, and that's why the subtitle of the book is From Preschool Teacher to University President. Never in my life did I assume that I would go these different steps, but what I am sure of is that when doors opened, I tried to respond, and sometimes I had to knock on the doors to make sure that I could get through. But I went from being a preschool teacher to actually living here in Oak Ridge, working in Knoxville as a Head Start director. I had majored in child development, so actually that job taught me a great deal about people and programs and federal funding. And I had some naive things I did, but they worked out well anyway. I just walked into Children's Hospital and said, I'm the Head Start director for Knox County, and we have some children with spina bifida in our program, and I'd like to partner with you. I didn't know that people just walked in and asked for these things. I found out later there were hierarchies for the school district and hierarchies for the hospital, but it worked out. We had a wonderful model program. And from that, I decided to pursue my doctorate. But I will go back and tell you one Head Start story because viewers, listeners like to hear it, I'm told. But when I needed a job after I finished my master's program, and my professor recommended me for the Head Start director's job, and I needed the job. So I said, well, I'll interview. And I interviewed with a woman named Willis Selvey, an imposing, large woman, and she scared the heck out of me. But I said, well, I'll never get this job. And in a few days, she called me, and I got the job. And I was to meet at Dante Head Start Center in Knoxville, not Dante, but Dante. We pronounced it differently. And we all met there with teachers from 14 centers and social workers and a nurse and a secretary. And I walked in and I thought, who are all these people? And I'm going to be responsible for all these people and all these 300 families. And so I was stunned, and I sort of sat in the back and waited for Miss Selvey to arrive. And everybody was chit-chatting away until Miss Selvey walked in, and there was absolute quiet. She walked to the front and she said, where's Shirley? And I sheepishly raised my hand, and she said, come up here. So I stood beside her, and she looked out and pointed at all those people, and she said, this is Shirley Raines. She's your Head Start director. And by that pat that said she's in charge, I actually became in charge. So sometimes it is the people who endorse you that, that make all the difference. So I'll go on from Head Start to getting a doctorate in early childhood education. And then one of the things I had to do in the very first days of my doctoral program, they said you have to have a collateral area of study. And there was a long list of possibilities. And there was one called organizational management and leadership. And I said, well, I've been managing an organization. Maybe I'll take that one. So as a fluke, I put down organizational management and leadership. And that changed my life, obviously, because I did as many studies in that area as I did in child development and early childhood. And then I went on to teach at the University of Alabama in that area. And while I was there, both of you are very familiar with higher education, so you'll know what this is like. The director, who was over all of the departments, came and said, Shirley, we need you to be the department chair. Now, I was a first-year faculty member. Now, you know what that means?
Yeah.
It means nobody else wants the job. But
Yeah.
absolutely everybody has turned him down already. But a first-year untenured faculty member can't say no. So naively, I said no, and I learned a lot of lessons there before going on to teach at various places, and eventually became a department chair at each one of those places. So while I went as faculty members, I often became the department chair, which tells you that leadership really was in my blood. The most startling change for me before becoming president was to become dean of the College of Education at the University of Kentucky. And there I learned, of course, a great deal and worked with the legislature and worked with all the higher ed administration and so forth. And after 3 years, they asked me to become the Vice Chancellor for Academic Services. I said, no, I love my job. I love my job as Dean of Education. And naively, I said I would do both jobs simultaneously. Now, only a woman or a just crazy person would try to do those two jobs simultaneously. But I really wanted to learn one job, and I really didn't want to leave the College of Education. But that prepared me for becoming a president, to learn the dean's role and then serve in the vice chancellor roles helped me a lot. My mother became ill, and I needed to get back to West Tennessee, where I was born. And it was too far to do all the traveling from Lexington, Kentucky to West Tennessee. And I contacted a former president of the University of Kentucky, and I said, Dr. Dickey, I'll do anything. I'll be a department chair. I'll teach. I'll do whatever, but I need to get close to my mother. And I said, would you recommend me? And he said, no. And I said, well, that's interesting. So I said, thank you for all the good things you've done with me and for me in the past. And he said, no, there's an opening as president, and I want to nominate you.
Oh.
And that, again, changed my life because, and my husband, who's always been supportive, Bob, said, they'll never accept you as president of the University of Memphis. They've never had a woman. They're not known for having women leaders. You are just not going to make it. And I said, well, I have to try. That's a job that I've been nominated for. And so anyway, I went, and I was one of the 10 finalists. And then I thought, well, that's as far, they've made their quota. They have an African American and they have a woman. So now they can choose whomever they want because they will have made the affirmative action checklist. But somehow I made it through the interviews and was president for 12 years, which is a long time to be a university president. And so that's my long story of my education journey. And I have lots of more stories, of course, in the book.
Well, that's a great summary of how you got to be where you are and published a really good book. Tell us about some of the experiences you had as president. I know being a woman and coming into that job for the first time as a woman, you had obviously had some issues to deal with and some changes to make happen there. So tell us a little about your experience as a president.
And Shirley, we have not mentioned the university. It's the University of Memphis. Is that correct?
It's the University of Memphis, which is a graduate degree granting Research One university with 23,000 students, then about a $750 million budget. And when you look at the foundations as well as the state budget, and high profile basketball, not so high profile football, although they wish they should be. Well known for the law school, which used to have the highest passing of the bar. I don't know if they still do. And lots of the usual wonderful engineering program, the Herf College of Engineering, and of course, a good education program. But the University of Memphis, and we were, and they still are, an aspiring university, but we identified ourselves as a metropolitan research university who built partnerships in the community and on the campus. And that was our emphasis. And that was before the word even partnerships started to be in the vernacular of what people wanted to do. So we felt good about that. The challenges were many. Of course, the challenges are always resources and people. You have to have the right people to get the right resources, and you have to have good working relationships with all of these. As a woman, I have to say, they thought I wouldn't know anything about sports, although, I came from Kentucky where they had a pretty good basketball team. So I did know about basketball. And both my first and second husbands were football players, so I knew a lot about football. So, and I always endorsed athletics as a way to bring discipline. And one of the first things I did was change all the athletic academic advisors, because when I asked the athletics director what the graduation rate was for athletes, and he told me, I said, what's wrong? And it has to be, the coaches have to be bought in, and there have to be good academic advisors. So we changed that right away. The challenges are immense. I had a student who was shot off campus going down to Tunica to gamble, and then came on campus and died on campus. There are just the tragedies. When Katrina happened in New Orleans, there were students who needed homes for their academic life. And even before I asked the governor, I got into a little trouble for doing this. I accepted all these students who needed an academic home. And then I called to ask the governor if it was okay. But sometimes, you just have to do the right thing.
Yes.
And, people in Memphis both on campus and in the community, adopted these students as if they were their own. I don't remember how many, but there were well over 100, maybe close to 200 that we took in, and it was the right thing to do. I was there during 9/11. In fact, I was supposed to be my ordination, my inauguration was supposed to happen that month, and we of course changed it because travel happened, all the kinds of things happened, and we moved it to the spring. But we had to protect the Arab students and the Far East students who were on our campus, and they experienced difficulty in the community. There were some who actually hid away for fear. And it was not so much what they experienced on campus, it was what they experienced getting to and from campus and living in the community. So 9/11 happened 2008. Do you remember what happened in 2008? It was a tremendous recession. Mm-hmm. And how to figure out how to receive, we were told we would receive less funds in higher ed, and how to keep students on track for their degrees. And we prioritized students first, faculty second. Faculty didn't like that too much, but faculty first to get so that no one's degree program would be jeopardized. And we even had to call in some good volunteers from the community to do some teaching of those students who just lacked one course or whatever, but that we couldn't manage to have a full-blown class. So we had to be quite inventive to get through 2008. 2011, resource-wise, was not a great deal better, but it was one that we had already known how to manage. We built buildings, a new student center, the FedEx Institute of Technology, the Kimmons-Wilson School of Hospitality, a new law school, not a new law school, but taking an historic building on the Mississippi River, which had been an old post office with big columns and everything, and turning it into a first-rate law school building. So, you know, when you, and a community health center for the School of Public Health. And we didn't have a School of Public Health, so we started one. So all of this to say, it's a very exciting life. It's very challenging, and feeling like you have a group of people, deans and all of my president's council who worked with me, all the vice presidents and so forth. It just is an invigorating thing to do. Even when it's difficult, it's invigorating because you have a sense that we're all in this together and that we're working for the greater good. So those are some of the broader ones. I mean, I can tell you personal stories, but I'll let you. I've been talking a long time, and you're supposed to ask questions.
Well, you're doing real good. We really appreciate learning more about the details of the leadership part of your life there and how well you've done that. You might go on and tell us something about what you've been doing lately and what you've involvement in Oak Ridge. So give us a little bit of those details.
Well, I'll do involvement in Oak Ridge first, and then what I'm doing lately. But after I announced that I was going to be retiring, I got a call from Gene Caldwell, Dr. Gene Caldwell, and I'd known him in Oak Ridge when he was a pediatrician for my son, Brian, and I knew him in the legislature. And Gene called me and said, well, what are you going to do when you retire to Oak Ridge? And I said, well, I'll get involved, but I want to wait a little while. And he said, that's too bad. I've already put you on the board of the Emory Valley Center. So That
That's
was
Gene.
he knew he could convince me, and he did. So I immediately became involved with the Emory Valley Center. And then Warren Gooch called me and said, we need somebody to chair the initiative for building a new preschool in Oak Ridge and where it should be built. And we need it to be a combination of people from the school district and people from city government. So my first chairing experience in Oak Ridge was chairing that diverse group.
Yeah.
That worked well together, but they didn't always have the same opinions. But we managed, and I had some wonderful people. Ellen Smith was one of the people who was on that group, and we were able to look at various locations, and I think we made a great location in the Scarborough community and a wonderful building. And I hope the early childhood programs will flourish there, and I think they will. And then I worked with the School Board Foundation, and now I'm also on the Roan State Foundation. I've been on it almost since the end of the first year that I was here, and I'm coming on 9 years of Oak Ridge. So it seems like people still refer to me as the new person. I don't know when you get to not be new in Oak Ridge. I guess I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I had the opportunity to tour that preschool not too long ago, and I was very impressed, not only with the way that they manage the students there and all of the really neat groups they have, but also the history that's been included in there. The various plaques are on the wall, and the recognition of that history, I think, is just tremendous. So
Yes.
I agree with you that you've made a great location. I thoroughly enjoyed being given a tour of the facility.
I admire your ability to lead, and you and Ray both, to be involved in groups of Oak Ridge. Oak Ridgers are a unique sort. You know, the old joke is you can always tell someone from Oak Ridge, but you can't tell them much. You know, so, but you know, it's that. Yeah, it takes some real leadership skills to be able to lead a group of smart, creative, passionate people, no matter where you are. And for the most part, when you have a group in Oak Ridge, that's what it's made up of. So
much like university faculty,
mm-hmm.
there's the same,
I'm sure,
sense of that. One of my greatest pleasures in Oak Ridge was chairing the First Steps program at the Methodist Church, because it's long. My son was in that program many years ago, and I was able to work with them for 2 terms. So I've stayed in the early education arena mostly, but now my work is I do leadership training for whomever asks me, frankly, if it is a good match with me. I mean, I don't accept everybody, but I work within and where I can get there and back in one day. My husband is ill, and so if I start the morning and can get there and back, whether it's by plane or driving, I tend to do that. But recently I spoke to women's higher education in Tennessee, and I often do Women's History Months and those kinds of things, but not all women's interest. One of the largest groups I did was Explorance, which is a huge multinational tech company that does a global Blue Notes conference every year. Their logo is blue, and so they did a Blue Notes conference, and it was a thrill to meet people from all over the world who are working both off-site and in different nations. I was frankly in awe of them and what they've been able to do. But one of their programs is evaluation of education not facilities, but institutions. So it fit. The education keeps coming back.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell us about your books. Talk a little bit. Ray mentioned that early on. So tell us about your books.
Well, I have 18 books. The first sets of books were for teachers, as you might imagine. So I have 15 for teachers, and for a while I served on Dolly Parton and the governor's books from birth. And so it's all of my books for teachers were about using children's literature in the curriculum, whether it was in science or math or in teaching reading. But those were my early books. And then I did some for Teachers College Press on creativity. And now I wrote the book on leadership, which we've already discussed. And then I was volunteering in my granddaughter's kindergarten class at Linden, and they were studying birds. And so I decided to write a book on birds. I had some poems I'd written on birds that I'd just do with the children when I came in. And I decided to put together a book. But I couldn't find a good photographer. I mean, I know Ray is a good photographer, but I needed a nature photographer who could do these finite nature ones. So I found a person in Memphis who had been on the faculty still is on the faculty, a nature photographer, Kurt Hart, and Ray can vouch for his photographs are just absolutely amazing.
I agree, they are. Yes.
So we did one on butterflies, and that fit nicely with the Butterfly Festival. And then we did one on birds. And in fact, I can show you that if the cover, if you'd like.
Sure, please.
Absolutely.
Okay, just a sec.
Okay.
I love that trail that's out there that in the Arboretum too, that uses those photographs. I agree with her. She could not have picked a better nature photographer than what she did. Yes. Isn't that beautiful?
That is. That's beautiful.
There are butterflies throughout, and then my poems, and I also with each one did a special information section for the teacher so that she or he could bring in more information about the butterfly or the bird, since it's right there on the same page. And then older children tend to start reading this on their own.
Wow.
And here's the one on birds. I don't know if it's showing up, the beautiful bluebird.
Wow.
Yes, that is pretty.
In the spring, we will have one on bees that's coming out. And the following sometime when the publisher agrees to it, we'll have one just called bugs, because children, well, you think they'll just say insects. They don't, they say bugs. So, so that's been joyful for me to do, and not totally unrelated since I wrote about children's literature, but anyway.
Wow.
That's a tremendous collection of books that you've produced. And again, I'll mention the UT Arboretum connection that you have. That's amazing too.
Well, that came about interestingly. Dolly Parton has storybook trails at some of the other parks in Tennessee, but they are just random books. They're not associated with nature. So the people at the Arboretum liked the idea of a book trail, but they wanted to have one that would deal with nature. So they called me after I presented at the Butterfly Festival and asked if I'd be interested in doing it. And of course, I jumped at the chance, as did our publisher. So they're large posters, quite large, that are scattered across the hillside, and the children, families can walk the hillside and look at the photos and read whatever they want to, or just enjoy the pictures.
Wow.
Well, you've had a tremendous life and are still enjoying a tremendous life. I'm so proud that you are in Oak Ridge, and I think you came at a very good time. And thank Gene Joyce or Gene Caldwell for getting you off right away. But I think that you are a good contributor to our community, and we're very, very glad that you're here. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience before we put a wrap on this?
Well, I think my philosophy of leadership is not unsimilar to my philosophy of teaching. When you're privileged enough to teach a classroom, you are privileged to be interacting with all of these people. And when you're a leader, you have the privilege of being that leader. And so respect and integrity are key, but also setting good goals and going after them. There's a saying in higher education that we're very good at studying problems and we're not so good at solving them. So I was determined that as we studied whatever our problem was, that we would get on about the business of solving it, because I think it is important to study problems, don't get me wrong, and to look at all the factors, sociological, political, scientific, whatever, but let's get on with the process of solving things. And I think followers, and there were wonderful followers at the university, liked to see that we were getting things done. We didn't do them impulsively, I don't mean that, but we got them done. And even in a framework, it takes so long in government to get things done, but we still have to make that steady progress. And I think followers will follow someone who's dedicated to making the steady progress and staying true to whatever the purpose of the organization is. And with that, I mean, that's my little bit of philosophy, but it's stood me well.
Well, you're a good living example of that philosophy, and I agree with you. Leaders who get things done have followers who oftentimes feel like they have done what is that's being accomplished. So a good leader not only knows how to study the problem, but they also know how to produce some change and improvements that actually address the problem. And we thank you very much for sharing that with us today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Well, Ray, we'll be back again in a couple of weeks with a new edition of Hidden History. And Shirley, thank you for being our guest.
I'm just delighted.
All right. All right, folks. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.